Do you ever wonder how inflation impacts the cities we live in? Let's embark on a journey to uncover the often unseen but deeply felt effects of inflation on our economy and day-to-day lives. Inflation is not just a buzzword thrown around by economists. It's a real phenomenon that has a profound impact on us all. In this discussion, we'll be taking a hard look at its specific effects on several U.S. cities. Picture this. You're living in a bustling city, working your 9 to 5, and suddenly your hard-earned dollar doesn't stretch quite as far as it used to. Groceries are more expensive, rent is up, and the cost of living is steadily rising. That's inflation in action. It's a silent, almost invisible force that can dramatically alter the economic landscape of a city. So, are you ready to dive into the world of inflation and its impacts? Let's move on to some hard-hitting facts and figures. Before we dive deep, it's crucial to understand what inflation actually is. In the simplest terms, inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising. Picture this. If you could buy a loaf of bread for $1 last year and this year it costs you $1.10, that's inflation at work. It's a gradual increase in prices over time. But what causes inflation? Well, there are two main causes: demand pull and cost push. Demand pull happens when demand for goods and services exceeds their supply. On the other hand, cost push inflation occurs when the costs of production increase, causing producers to raise prices to maintain their profit margins. The effect? Inflation erodes the purchasing power of money. That means, as inflation rises, every dollar you hold buys a smaller percentage of a good or service. With this basic understanding of inflation, we're now ready to explore its impact on different U.S. cities. Consider New York City, a bustling metropolis and economic powerhouse. Yet even this titan of commerce isn't immune to the effects of inflation. As one of the most expensive cities in the world, New York City has always had a high cost of living. But in recent years, the city has seen an inflation rate that outpaces the national average. Everything from a cup of coffee to a ride on the subway to a night out at a Broadway show has seen a price increase. The city that never sleeps also seems to never stop getting more expensive. Housing prices in the Big Apple have always been sky high, but inflation has sent them soaring even further. The median home price in New York City has seen a significant jump, making home ownership an increasingly elusive dream for many New Yorkers. Renters are feeling the pinch too, with rental rates rising faster than wages. And speaking of wages, while they have indeed been growing in New York City, they're not keeping pace with the rising cost of living. A dollar just doesn't stretch as far as it used to in the Empire State. This wage stagnation coupled with rising costs means that many residents are finding it harder to make ends meet. But it's not all gloom and doom. The city's robust economy and diverse industries provide some insulation against inflation. And New Yorkers are nothing if not resilient. They've weathered financial storms before and will no doubt do so again. However, it's clear that inflation is a formidable opponent. It's a silent eroder of purchasing power, a stealthy thief in the night. And while New York City has many strengths, it's not invincible. The city's high cost of living, exacerbated by inflation, is a challenge that needs to be addressed. As you can see, the impact of inflation can be quite significant, even in a thriving city like New York. Now let's move on to a different type of city, Detroit. A city that once thrived as the heart of America's automotive industry, Detroit has seen its fair share of struggles in recent years, and the spectre of inflation has only added to these issues. Detroit, in contrast to New York City, has been grappling with economic issues that have been exacerbated by inflation. The city has been battling high unemployment rates, with a significant number of its residents out of work. With fewer people earning incomes, spending power decreases, creating a vicious cycle that can be hard to break. In addition, Detroit has been facing high levels of poverty. When inflation kicks in, the cost of basic necessities like food, housing, and healthcare rises. These price hikes hit low-income households the hardest, pushing many into an even deeper state of poverty. But it's not just about unemployment and poverty. Inflation also impacts the cost of living in a city. And in Detroit, residents have been feeling the pinch. Everyday items have become more expensive and people are finding it harder to stretch their dollars. This presents a real challenge for a city that's already dealing with economic hardship. Yet, amidst these challenges, Detroit is a city of resilience. Its residents are known for their grit and determination. They've weathered economic downturns, job losses, and now inflation. And they continue to push forward, finding ways to adapt and survive. The story of Detroit is, in many ways, a story of the broader American economy. It's a tale of struggle and resilience, of grappling with economic realities while striving for a better future. It's about the impact of inflation on everyday life and the ways in which people and cities adapt to these changes. Inflation, as we can see, is not just an abstract economic concept. It's a real-world issue that impacts people's lives in profound ways, and its effects can vary greatly from city to city. Inflation can indeed have starkly different effects on different cities, as we've seen with Detroit. But what about the rest of the US? How does inflation impact other cities? Let's cast a wider net and explore the inflationary trends across the nation. The story of inflation isn't confined to New York or Detroit. It's a story that unfolds in every corner of the US. From the bustling streets of Los Angeles to the serene landscapes of rural Idaho. In the Golden State of California, cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles have been grappling with inflation rates that make the cost of living seem like a gold rush. The price of housing alone has skyrocketed, turning the dream of home ownership into a distant mirage for many residents. Meanwhile, in the heartland, we find cities like Omaha, Nebraska, where inflation has been more subtle. Here it's not so much about the soaring costs, but rather the slow and steady climb of everyday items. The price of a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, or a tank of gas, they all add up and chip away at the purchasing power of the hard-working folks in the Midwest. Down south, cities like Atlanta and Houston are also feeling the pinch. These cities have seen significant inflation in their housing and energy sectors. This has been particularly tough on low-income families who spend a larger percentage of their income on these necessities. But let's not forget the smaller towns and rural areas. Inflation doesn't discriminate by size or population. In places like Casper, Wyoming, or Bismarck, North Dakota, the rising costs of healthcare and transportation are the key drivers of inflation. So, you see, inflation is a complex beast, a chameleon that changes its colors depending on where you are. It's not just about the price of goods and services going up. It's about how these rising costs affect the lives of everyday Americans. From the single mother in San Francisco struggling to pay rent, to the retiree in Omaha trying to stretch his pension. As we've seen, inflation's impact is widespread, but its effects can vary greatly from city to city. So, what have we learned about the impact of inflation on US cities? To begin with, we unraveled the concept of inflation. It's simply the general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. While it might seem like just a financial term, its implications are far-reaching, touching every aspect of our lives, from the cost of living to the health of our economies. Then we took a dive into the heart of the Big Apple, New York City. We saw how this bustling metropolis, known for its high cost of living, is grappling with inflation. The cost of goods and services is skyrocketing, making it increasingly difficult for average New Yorkers to keep up. The city's vibrant energy is being tested as prices continue to rise, and the divide between the haves and have-nots is becoming more pronounced. From there, we shifted our gaze to Detroit, a city that has been wrestling with economic challenges for decades. In Detroit, inflation is exacerbating existing issues, making it harder for the city and its residents to bounce back. The cost of basic necessities is on the rise and people are feeling the pinch. It's a stark reminder that inflation doesn't impact all places or all people equally. We also took a broader look at the inflationary landscape across the US. It's clear that inflation is not a localized problem but a national issue. It's affecting cities big and small, from the coastal metropolises to the heartland towns. The ripple effects of inflation are being felt far and wide, and it's a challenge we must face together. In conclusion, the impact of inflation on US cities is profound and varied. It's more than just numbers on a screen or figures in a report. It's about the lived experiences of people, the vibrancy of cities, and the health of our national economy. Inflation is a complex and multifaceted issue, and understanding its impact can help us navigate its challenges. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of inflation's impact on U.S. cities.